The white wolf was dying. Not from a wound. Not from hunger. Not from old age. She was dying because the woman she loved had been taken away. For 7 days, the greatest beast in the northern kingdom had refused every piece of food placed before her. The healers had brought warm broth, fresh venison, healing herbs, and even ancient medicines from the mountain temples. Asha had touched none of them. She simply lay beneath the dying firelight of the northern tower, her enormous white body growing thinner against the frozen stone. The warriors who once feared her now whispered that she would not survive the winter. Then, on the 7th night, the fortress gates opened. The Alpha King returned. But he had not come alone. Between 2 armed guards walked a young woman in iron chains. She was barefoot. Her clothes were torn. Snow covered her dark hair, and blood marked her wrists where the chains had cut into her skin. The guards kept their weapons ready because they knew exactly who she was. Elira, the woman the king had banished months ago. The woman who had once been the only person capable of touching Asha without fear. No one understood why Kaelen had dragged her back. No one understood why he had brought her back as a prisoner. But then Asha heard her footsteps. The dying wolf lifted her head. The courtyard went silent. Asha stood. Her legs shook beneath her enormous body, but she forced herself forward. 1 step, then another, until she reached Elira. The wolf lowered her head against the chains around the woman's wrists. And suddenly, for the first time in months, Asha's tail moved. Elira dropped to her knees, tears running down her face. She pressed her forehead against the wolf's. Then she looked toward the Alpha King. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The wolf isn't dying, because I left." Kaelen froze. Elira's eyes moved toward the dark windows of the fortress. "Someone inside your kingdom poisoned her." And in that moment, the Alpha King realized something far more terrifying than the possibility of losing his beast. The enemy had never been outside his walls. It had been standing beside his throne all along. 3 weeks before Elira returned to Blackstone Fortress in chains, the kingdom of Vial was already beginning to forget what spring felt like. Winter had swallowed the northern valleys. Snow covered the roads between the villages, buried the fences around farmhouses, and climbed halfway up the stone walls of abandoned watchtowers. The mountain passes were closed. Merchants had stopped traveling after sunset. Even the hunters who knew every trail in the northern forest stayed close to home. The cold was not unusual for Vial. What frightened the people was how long it had lasted. For months, the wind had screamed down from the mountains. For months, the rivers had remained trapped beneath ice. And for months, something inside Blackstone Fortress had been slowly dying. Her name was Asha. She was the Alpha King's beast. Every child in Vial knew her name. Some knew her as the White Wolf of Blackstone. Some called her the Winter Fong. Warriors had other names for her, names they only whispered when they were certain she could not hear them.
Monster. Ghost.
Demon of the North. Asha was none of those things. She was simply a wolf who had learned too early that humans were dangerous. She had been found as a young creature near the northern mountains, half frozen beneath the body of her dead mother. King Kaelen's father had brought her back to the fortress, believing she might one day become the next royal beast. No one expected her to survive. But she did. She grew. And when Kaelen became king, the ancient bond between them awakened. From that day onward, Asha followed him everywhere. She stood beside his throne during court. She slept outside his chamber when he traveled. She ran beside his horse during hunts. And when Kaelen went to war, she went with him. She had saved his life more than once. Kaelen trusted her more than he trusted most men. Yet there was one person Asha trusted even more. Elira. That was why Kaelen could not understand what was happening. He stood outside Asha's chamber on a gray winter morning, staring at the closed doors. Behind them, the healers were working. He could hear the soft movement of bowls, the clinking of glass, the occasional murmur of frightened voices. Then silence. Kaelen looked toward the nearest guard. "How long?" The guard swallowed. "Almost an hour, Majesty." "Why?" "Healer Tomas says she will not take the medicine." Kaelen closed his eyes. He had heard that answer before. For 7 days. 7 days without food. 7 days without medicine. 7 days of watching the strongest creature in Vair become weaker. He opened the door. Warm air touched his face. The chamber smelled of herbs and blood. Asha lay near the window. Her white fur was dull. Her sides rose and fell beneath her ribs. A bowl of fresh meat sat untouched beside her. Another contained broth. Another held crushed herbs mixed with honey. Kaelen looked at the old healer. "Leave us." Tomas hesitated. "Majesty." "Leave us." The healer bowed. Everyone left. The door closed. Kaelen walked toward the wolf. "Asha." Her ear moved. That was all. He knelt. Once, this would have been impossible. The beast would have pushed her enormous head beneath his hand. Now she did nothing. Kaelen reached toward her. His fingers touched her fur.
Cold.
Far too cold. He pulled his hand back. "When did you stop trusting me?" Asha opened her eyes. Golden eyes. Weak eyes. For a moment, Kaelen saw something inside them that looked almost human. Accusation. Then she looked away. Kaelen's throat tightened. He knew why. He knew exactly why. Because there was an empty corner of the room. And because the woman who used to sit there was gone. Elira. The name alone was enough to make guilt settle heavily in his chest. He looked toward the corner. He could still see her there, in his memory. Always sitting on the floor. Never taking the chair the servants brought her. Never complaining about the cold. Never asking for anything. She had come to the fortress 2 years earlier as an assistant to the royal healer. She was not noble.
She was not wealthy.
She did not belong to one of the great families of Vair. Her father had been a traveling herbalist. Her mother had died when Elira was young. She had grown up moving from village to village, learning how to treat wounds, broken bones, fevers, and frightened animals. Nobody expected her to become important. Nobody expected the Alpha King's beast to love her. The first time Elira entered Asha's chamber, Asha had attacked the previous healer. The man had barely escaped with his life. The guards had wanted to kill the wolf. Kaelen had refused. Instead, they brought Elira. She was terrified. Kaelen remembered that clearly. Her hands had trembled. Her breathing had been shallow. But she had not run. She had entered the chamber carrying a bowl of water. Asha had been lying beside the fireplace. Her eyes had followed Elira. Every guard in the room had reached for his weapon. Elira had slowly turned toward them. "Please leave." The guards had looked at Kaelen. He had almost laughed. A young healer's assistant was asking armed soldiers to leave a room containing the most dangerous creature in the kingdom. But something in her face made him pause.
So he ordered them out.
Elira sat on the floor. She placed the bowl beside her. Then waited. Asha watched her. 5 minutes passed.
10. 20.
The fire crackled. Snow struck the windows. Neither moved. Then Asha lifted her head. Elira lowered her gaze. The wolf stood. 1 step. Another. She approached the bowl.
Drank.
Then lowered herself beside Elira. That was the beginning. After that day, Asha refused to allow anyone else to treat her wounds. If Elira was present, the wolf became calm. If Elira was gone, she became restless. They developed a strange language, without words. Asha would nudge Elira's shoulder when she wanted food. She would place one paw on Elira's boot when she wanted attention. During storms, when thunder shook the fortress, Asha would lie beside Elira until the worst of the weather passed. And Elira never treated the wolf like a monster. She treated her like a living creature. That was what Kaelen admired about her. At least, he had once admired it. Then the council had come to him. Lord Malrec had been the first. Malrec had served the royal family for more than 20 years. He was calm, educated, respected. He knew every law in Vair, every trade route, every noble family, every secret passage beneath Blackstone Fortress. Kaelen trusted him. That was his first mistake. Malrec had brought ancient documents to the throne room. Documents describing a forgotten family of forest guardians. A family said to possess a strange connection with wolves. A family whose bloodline had disappeared centuries earlier. Or so everyone believed. Malrec had placed one document before Kaelen. It showed the guardian symbol. a silver crescent surrounding the shape of a wolf's paw. Then, he placed Elira's pendant beside it. The symbols were identical. Kaelen had stared at them. What are you suggesting? Malrec had lowered his voice. That she is not who she claims to be. Kaelen had rejected the idea. But the council kept pushing. They told him Elira's ancestors had once served the ancient wolf clans. They told him the Guardians had been enemies of the first kings. They told him the bond between the Alpha King and his beast could be corrupted if the Guardian bloodline returned. Kaelen did not believe them. Not completely. But fear is dangerous. It does not need proof. It only needs possibility. And Kaelen was afraid of losing Asha. So, he made the decision that would eventually nearly destroy them both. He allowed the council to remove Elira from the fortress. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he was protecting the kingdom. He told himself he was protecting Asha. But he never told himself that he was simply afraid. The night Elira left, snow covered the courtyard. She had carried one small bag. Nothing else. Asha had followed her to the gate. The wolf had scratched at the doors. Kaelen had watched from a high balcony. Elira had looked back. For one moment, their eyes met. Kaelen could have stopped everything. One word. One command. He could have ordered the gates closed. He could have told the council no. He did not. The gates opened. Elira walked away. Asha howled. And by the next morning, she refused her food. At first, Kaelen thought she was simply grieving. Then came the second day. The third. The fourth. By the fifth, Asha could barely walk. By the seventh, the healers began preparing for death. Now Kaelen sat beside her again. He looked at the wolf. I will bring her back. Asha did not move. I don't know where she is. Nothing. But I will find her. The wolf's ear twitched. Kaelen stood. He walked toward the door. Then he stopped. Something was scratched into the stone beside the window. 3 curved lines. A crescent. A wolf's paw. Kaelen frowned. He had never noticed it before. He crouched. The carving looked ancient. But beneath it was something else. A smaller symbol. The same silver crescent from Elira's pendant. Kaelen's breathing stopped. He touched the mark. Behind him, Asha lifted her head. The king turned. The wolf was staring directly at the carving.
Not at him.
At the symbol, Kaelen stood. Bring the royal archivist. Within minutes, an old man named Tomas entered the chamber. He carried a stack of dusty books. Kaelen pointed toward the wall. What is this? The archivist's face changed. He went pale. Majesty. What is it? The old man looked at Asha. Then at the symbol. Then back at Kaelen. It is the mark of the first Guardians. Kaelen's expression hardened. Guardians of what? The archivist hesitated. The royal beasts. Silence. Kaelen stepped closer. Why have I never heard of them? The old man's lips trembled. Because the history was sealed. By whom? The archivist looked toward the floor. Your grandfather. Kaelen's jaw tightened. Why? The old man took a slow breath. Because the truth could destroy the royal bloodline. Kaelen stared at him. What truth? The archivist opened one of the books. Dust rose into the air. He turned several pages. Then stopped. There was an old painting. A young woman stood beside a massive white wolf. Behind them stood the first Alpha King of Vial. Kaelen leaned closer. The woman wore a silver crescent around her neck. She looked almost exactly like Elira. His heart began pounding. The archivist whispered the words beneath the painting. The Guardian chooses the beast. Kaelen turned the page. Another sentence. His face went cold. When the Guardian is separated from the chosen beast, the beast begins to die. Kaelen looked at Asha, then toward the empty corner where Elira used to sit. Suddenly, every decision he had made seemed to stand before him. He had not protected Asha. He had wounded her. He had not protected Elira. He had abandoned her. And somewhere beyond the northern mountains, the woman he had allowed to disappear might be the only person who could save the creature he loved. Kaelen closed the book. Prepare my horse. The archivist looked startled. Majesty? I'm going after her. And the council? Kaelen walked toward the door. They can wait.
He stopped.
then looked back at Asha. I have already waited too long. Outside, the wind rose. Snow swept across the fortress. And far beyond the walls, somewhere deep inside the ancient forest, a lone white wolf lifted her head toward the coming storm. She was waiting too, not for the king, for Elira. Kaelen left Blackstone Fortress before sunrise. The sky was still dark when the stable doors opened, and cold air rushed inside hard enough to make the horses rear against their reins. Snow had fallen throughout the night, covering the courtyard in a smooth, white sheet that reflected the faint blue light of morning. The king stood beside his horse, while Captain Darren tightened the saddle straps. 6 riders would accompany him. No royal banners. No trumpets. No army. Kaelen had ordered everything unnecessary left behind. He did not want the kingdom to know where he was going. More importantly, he did not want the council to know how desperate he had become. Lord Malrec arrived moments before they left. He came wrapped in a long black cloak, his silver hair untouched by the wind, his expression as calm as if he were walking into a warm dining hall instead of a frozen courtyard.
Majesty.
Kaelen looked at him. Malrec. I hear you intend to travel north. I do. At this time of year? Kaelen mounted his horse. Yes. Malrec stepped closer. May I ask why? Kaelen's eyes hardened. You may. The advisor waited. Kaelen did not answer. After a moment, Malrec smiled. It concerns the woman. The king's hand tightened around the reins. You seem unusually interested in her. I am interested in anything that threatens your life. Kaelen looked at him for several seconds. Then he said quietly, Asha is dying. Malrec's expression barely changed. That is unfortunate. She began wasting away the night Elira left. A coincidence. Kaelen leaned forward slightly. Do you believe that? Malrec met his gaze. I believe the kingdom cannot afford superstition. Kaelen said nothing. He kicked his horse forward. As the gates opened, he heard Malrec call after him. Majesty. Kaelen stopped. If the woman is dangerous, bringing her back may destroy everything you are trying to protect. Kaelen turned. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then the king said, Perhaps I should have protected her instead. He rode away. The fortress disappeared behind the trees. For the first several hours, the journey was quiet. Snow fell steadily. The horses' breath rose in white clouds. The road became narrower as they entered the northern forest. Tall pines crowded the path, their branches heavy with snow. The farther they traveled, the quieter the world became. There were no villages, no smoke from chimneys, no hunters, only trees,
Wind.
and the occasional distant cry of a bird. Captain Darren rode beside Kaelen. How far? Kaelen looked at the map. If the reports are accurate, another day. And if they're not? Kaelen folded the map. Then we search until we find her. Darren hesitated. Majesty. What? Why does the council fear her so much? Kaelen looked toward the forest. I don't know. You believe she is innocent? Kaelen took several seconds before answering. I believe I should have found out before I let them take her. Darren lowered his gaze. That was enough. By sunset, they stopped beneath a rocky overhang. The wind was too strong to continue safely. The soldiers gathered wood. Kaelen stood away from the fire. He stared into the forest. Something had been following them. He could feel it. Then Darren appeared beside him. Tracks. Kaelen looked down. Wolf prints.
Fresh. 3 sets.
1 large. 2 smaller. They've been following us since the ridge, Darren said. Kaelen crouched. The tracks circled their camp, then disappeared toward the trees. Don't chase them. Darren frowned. Why? They're not hunting us. That night, Kaelen barely slept. He kept thinking about Elira. He remembered her laughter, her quiet habits, the way she would hum while preparing medicine, the way she always saved the softest pieces of meat for injured animals. He remembered one evening when Asha had fallen asleep with her enormous head resting against Elira's knees. Elira had looked up and found Kaelen watching. You should smile more, she had said. Kaelen had frowned. Why? Because when you do, you look less like a king. He had almost smiled. Instead, he had said, I am a king. Elira had laughed softly. I know. That memory hurt now. Because he realized he had spent months missing the sound of her laughter while pretending he had made the right decision. The next morning they continued. Near midday, they found the first sign of Elira. A small wooden shelter beneath a massive pine. The door was covered with animal scratches. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the roof. A clay bowl sat beside the entrance. Darren dismounted. Someone lives here. Kaelen entered. The shelter was simple. A blanket, a small knife, several jars, a stack of firewood, and dozens of tiny bundles containing medicinal plants. There was no luxury, no protection, no comfort. Kaelen found a wooden carving beside the wall. A little fox, then another, a rabbit, then a bird. Elira had made them. He picked up the fox. His thumb moved over the smooth wood. Darren watched him. She has been helping animals. Kaelen looked around. She always did. Outside, something moved. A fox appeared between the trees. Its leg was injured. Kaelen stepped toward it.
The fox ran.
Darren smiled. She must have treated it. Kaelen looked at the footprints. Then she is close. They searched until evening. The forest grew darker. Snow began falling harder. Then Kaelen heard a sound. A faint cry. Not human. He followed it. Behind a fallen tree, a young fox struggled beneath a branch. Kaelen crouched. Before he could lift it, a woman appeared. She was carrying a bundle of herbs. Her dark hair fell around her face. Her clothes were simple. Her hands were red from the cold. She dropped the herbs. The fox immediately crawled toward her. Elira knelt. She lifted the branch. The animal escaped. Then she looked up. Kaelen stood several steps away. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. The king felt something inside his chest tighten. She looked different, thinner, tired, but her eyes were the same. Elira slowly stood. Her gaze moved toward the soldiers, then toward Kaelen's sword, then back to his face. You found me. Kaelen nodded. Yes. She looked toward the trees. Why? Asha is dying. The color drained from her face. How long? 7 days, without food. Elira's eyes closed. She breathed slowly. Is she still alive? Yes. Then go. Kaelen stared at her.
What?
Go back. Elira. You found me. Now leave. She turned. Kaelen dismounted. She needs you. Elira stopped. For several seconds, she did not move. Then she whispered, You should have thought of that before. Kaelen felt the words like a blade. I was wrong. She turned toward him. Yes. I was afraid. Yes. I thought I was protecting her. You were protecting yourself.
Kaelen looked down.
She was right.
He hated that she was right.
I need you to return. Elira's eyes filled with tears. I cannot. Why? Because I know what happens when I trust you. Kaelen stepped closer. I will not let them hurt you. You already did. Silence. The wind moved through the trees. Elira wiped one tear from her cheek. I spent months believing you would come. Kaelen's face tightened. You did not.
No.
I should have. Yes. He looked toward the shelter. Come back. She shook her head.
No.
Kaelen knew there was only one thing left. He hated himself for it, but he was desperate. He nodded toward the guards. Elira saw the movement. Her eyes widened.
No.
The guards approached. She stepped backward. Kaelen. He looked at her. Please. That one word almost stopped him. Almost. But Asha's dying face appeared in his mind. He could not lose her. The guards reached Elira. She did not fight. That made it worse. Iron closed around her wrists. The sound echoed through the trees. Elira looked down at the chains, then slowly lifted her eyes toward Kaelen. I came to your kingdom with nothing. Kaelen could not speak. You gave me a room. Her voice shook. You gave me work. A tear rolled down her cheek. You let me care for her. She looked toward the fortress in the distance. And now you bring me back like a criminal. Kaelen stepped forward. I am sorry. She gave a quiet, broken laugh. Sorry does not open chains. The journey back began that same evening. Elira rode between two guards. Kaelen remained ahead. Nobody spoke. Snow fell harder. The forest seemed darker. Then, sometime after midnight, Darren noticed movement. 3 wolves stood on a ridge. Watching. Kaelen stopped his horse. The wolves did not move. One was gray. One was black. The third was white. Elira looked at them. Her face changed. She whispered something too quietly for anyone to hear. The white wolf stepped forward, then lowered its head. Elira's eyes filled with tears. Kaelen looked at her. What did you say? She shook her head. Nothing. The wolf disappeared into the trees. The next morning, the wolves returned. This time there were 5. They followed the travelers, never attacking, never approaching, just watching. At sunset, Elira stumbled. The chain around her ankle had rubbed the skin raw. Kaelen noticed. He dismounted. He walked toward her. The guards stepped aside. He knelt. He saw the blood. His expression changed. Why didn't you say anything? Elira looked away. You would have cared? Kaelen removed a cloth from his belt. He wrapped it around her ankle. His hands were careful. Elira watched silently. When he finished, he stood. He wanted to say something. Instead, he returned to his horse. That night, the temperature dropped so low that the fire nearly froze beneath the wind. Elira curled beneath herself. Kaelen saw her shivering. He removed his cloak. He walked toward her, then stopped. He remembered her words. Sorry does not open chains. He placed the cloak on the ground beside her, then walked away. Elira looked at it. For several seconds, she did not move. Finally, she pulled it around herself. Kaelen saw. He said nothing. The next morning, the fortress appeared beyond the trees. Blackstone Fortress. Dark walls. Tall towers. Frozen banners. Elira stared at it. She had once called that place home. Now she was returning in chains. The gates opened. The guards entered first. Then Kaelen. Then Elira. And before anyone could announce her arrival, a sound came from the northern tower.
A howl. Weak. Broken.
But unmistakable. Asha. Elira stopped. The guards pulled the chain. She turned toward the tower. Asha. The great wolf appeared at the top of the steps. The healers tried to stop her. She pushed past them. She descended. 1 step. Then another. Her legs trembled. She nearly fell. Kaelen reached forward. Asha ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on Elira. The courtyard went silent. Elira dropped to her knees. Asha crossed the final distance, then collapsed against her. Elira wrapped both arms around the wolf's neck. Asha's breathing was weak, but peaceful. For the first time in months, she had stopped trembling. Kaelen stared. Then Elira lifted her face. There were tears in her eyes. She pressed her palm against Asha's ribs. Her expression changed. Something is wrong. Kaelen stepped closer. What? Elira looked at him. She is still being poisoned. The king froze. Elira slowly lifted the wolf's head. Her body is fighting something. Kaelen looked toward the fortress. Who? Elira's eyes moved across the courtyard. Past the guards. Past the servants. Past the windows of the royal chambers. I don't know. Then she lowered her voice. But whoever it is. Her fingers tightened in Asha's fur. They're still inside this castle. For the first time in months, Asha slept without trembling. Elira remained beside her through the entire night. The guards had been ordered to remain outside the chamber, but nobody tried to stop Elira from entering. Not even the healers questioned her anymore. They had watched the wolf nearly die, and they had watched her return to life the moment Elira came back. The difference was impossible to deny. Asha ate. Only a little. Elira tore small pieces of warm venison and placed them in her palm. Asha lifted her head. She sniffed, then gently took the meat. The healer standing nearby covered his mouth in disbelief. She hasn't eaten like that in months. Elira did not answer. She was watching Asha's eyes. The wolf swallowed, then took another piece. Elira smiled faintly, slowly. Asha rested her chin against Elira's knee. The woman stroked the fur behind her ears. Outside the window, snow fell against the glass. Kaelen stood in the doorway. He had been there for nearly 10 minutes. Elira finally noticed him. "You can come in." Kaelen entered. Asha opened one golden eye. Kaelen stopped. The wolf did not growl, but she did not move toward him either. He accepted the distance. His gaze remained on Elira. "How is she?" "Better." "Because of you?" Elira shook her head. "Because she knows she isn't alone anymore." Kaelen looked down. The words were gentle. They still hurt. He walked closer. "Can you save her?" Elira's fingers continued moving through Asha's fur. "I don't know." Kaelen's expression tightened. "Tell me what you need." "Time." "How much?" "As much as she has." Kaelen nodded. He turned toward the guards. "No one enters this chamber without Elira's permission." The guards bowed. Then he looked back. "I mean no one." Elira looked at him. "Not even the council?" "Not even the council." For the first time, something softened in her expression. It lasted only a moment. Then Asha coughed. Elira immediately leaned forward. She examined the wolf's mouth. Her eyes narrowed.
What?
Kaelen stepped closer. Her gums. They were pale. Too pale. Elira touched them, then examined Asha's eyes. Her breathing. Her pause. "She is improving." Kaelen waited, but Elira looked toward the bowls. Something is still hurting her. She examined the meat.
The broth.
The herbs. Nothing looked unusual. She smelled the water. Nothing. She checked the medicine. Nothing. Then she looked at the bedding. Asha had always slept on thick wool blankets. Elira lifted one. Nothing. Another. Nothing. She reached beneath the final blanket. Her fingers touched glass.
She stopped.
Slowly, she pulled out a tiny vial. Dark liquid clung to the bottom.
Kaelen's face changed.
Where did that come from? Elira stared at the wax seal. The royal crest was pressed into it. Kaelen took the vial. His fingers tightened. Who has access to this? The healer looked terrified. The medicine stores. Who? Royal physicians. Senior healers. The council. Kaelen's eyes hardened. Who delivered Asha's last medicine? The healer swallowed. Lord Malrec's assistant. Silence filled the chamber. Kaelen looked toward the door. Bring him. The guards left. Elira placed her hand on Asha's head. The wolf opened her eyes. Kaelen looked at the beast, then at the vial. Someone had been poisoning her. Not once. Repeatedly. And they had been doing it while she lay inside the most heavily guarded fortress in the kingdom. That meant the enemy had access to the royal chambers. Someone trusted. Someone close. Someone who knew exactly what would happen if Asha died. Kaelen turned toward Elira. Why would anyone want her dead? Elira looked at him. Because she is your strength. Kaelen said nothing. If your beast dies, Elira continued, you become weaker. Not physically. Politically. The king's eyes narrowed. Elira looked toward the throne room beyond the door. Every lord in Vare knows the Alpha King is strongest when his beast stands beside him. Kaelen understood. If Asha died, enemies would see weakness. The kingdom would become unstable. Noble families would challenge his authority. Neighboring kingdoms might attack. And someone could use that chaos to take the throne. Kaelen's voice became cold. Malrec. Elira did not answer. You suspect him. I suspect everyone. Kaelen looked at her. She gave a tired smile. You taught me that. He almost smiled. Almost. Then footsteps echoed outside. A servant entered. Majesty. Kaelen turned. The council has assembled. Tell them I am unavailable. They insist. Kaelen's eyes hardened. Then they can insist. The servant bowed and left. Elira watched him. You should go.
No.
You are king. I know. They will become suspicious. They already are. Elira looked toward the vial. Then you should pretend you trust them. Kaelen studied her. You have become very good at surviving. Her smile disappeared. You taught me that too. He left. The council waited in the throne room. Lord Malrec stood at the center. Around him were 7 nobles. Old families. Powerful families. Families who had supported Kaelen's father. Malrec turned as Kaelen entered. Majesty. Kaelen walked to the throne. He did not sit. Why are you here? Malrec folded his hands. We are concerned. About. The prisoner. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. Her name is Elira. Malrec's mouth tightened. The woman. Kaelen looked at the council. You came here to discuss her? And the beast. Kaelen became very still. Continue. Malrec stepped forward. Asha's condition has worsened since that woman returned. Kaelen almost laughed. Instead, he asked, has it? She remains gravely ill. She ate this morning. Malrec paused. That is encouraging. She ate because Elira fed her. Or because the poison is changing. Kaelen stared at him. Poison. Malrec's face remained calm. Perhaps you should ask your healers. Kaelen watched him carefully. There it was. Too convenient. Malrec already knew. Kaelen had not told the council about the vial. He had not told anyone. Yet Malrec had mentioned poison. The king's suspicion deepened. Leave. The nobles looked shocked. Malrec bowed. As you command. They left. Kaelen remained alone in the throne room. He looked toward the high windows. Snow fell beyond them. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He returned to Asha's chamber after dark. Elira was sitting beside the fire. Asha slept. Kaelen entered quietly. Elira looked up. You found something. Perhaps. He told her about the council. She listened, then said, he knew. Kaelen nodded. Yes. Lord Malrec. Yes. Elira looked toward Asha. He was always afraid of her. Kaelen frowned. Why? Because she could sense him. The king looked at the sleeping wolf. How? Animals notice things people ignore. Elira paused. Whenever Malrec came near her, Asha watched him. Kaelen remembered. He had seen it. Many times. He had simply never considered why. Elira stood. We need to search her chamber. We already did. Not enough. She walked toward the fireplace. Then stopped. Asha hides things. Kaelen frowned. What things? Anything she considers important. Elira knelt beside the wolf. She ran her hand beneath the edge of the blanket. Nothing. She checked beneath the wooden bed frame. Nothing. Then she noticed a small scratch on the stone floor. She moved the blanket aside. Asha's paw had scratched the floor repeatedly. Elira followed the marks. They led toward the wall. She touched the stone. It moved. A hidden compartment opened. Inside was a small bundle of cloth. Kaelen crouched beside her. Elira unfolded it. Inside was her pendant. Kaelen stared. How did that get here? Elira's face went pale. I lost it the night I was taken. Kaelen looked at Asha. The wolf had kept it. For months. Elira touched the pendant. A faint warmth moved through the metal. She pulled back. What? Kaelen saw it. The silver crescent was glowing. Only faintly, but unmistakably. The symbol on the wall began to glow too. 3 lines. A crescent. A paw. Then the chamber shook. Asha suddenly opened her eyes. She stood. Her ears pointed toward the northern mountains. A howl rose from beyond the fortress. Another answered. Then another. The windows rattled. Kaelen looked at Elira. What is happening? She shook her head. I don't know. The ancient symbol grew brighter. A crack appeared across the stone wall. Behind it was a hidden passage. Cold air poured into the chamber. Kaelen raised his sword. Elira held the lantern. Together, they stepped inside. The passage was old. Much older than the fortress. The walls were covered in carvings. Wolves. Women. Kings. And the same silver crescent. At the end of the passage stood a stone door. Kaelen pushed it open. Inside was a room filled with ancient books. One book lay open on a stone table. Elira approached. The page showed a drawing of a white wolf standing beside a woman. The The woman wore the silver crescent. Beneath the image were the words, "The Guardian does not command the beast." Elira turned the page. "The Guardian gives the beast a reason to live." Kaelen stared at the words. Then another line appeared beneath them. "If the Guardian is separated from the chosen wolf, the bond will weaken until death." Elira's eyes filled with tears. Kaelen slowly looked at her. "You knew." She shook her head.
No.
"You knew something." "I knew my family had stories about wolves. But not this."
No.
Kaelen stepped closer. "Then why did Malrec know?" Elira's expression changed. She looked toward the darkness behind them. A sound came from the passage. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Kaelen drew his sword. Elira moved closer to Asha. The door opened. Lord Malrec stood there. And behind him were armed soldiers. Malrec smiled. "You should never have opened that door." Kaelen raised his sword. "How did you find us?" Malrec's eyes moved toward Elira. "Because I've been waiting for you to discover the truth." The chamber went silent. Elira stared at him. Malrec continued. "Your family was never supposed to return." Kaelen's face hardened. "What did you do?" Malrec smiled. "I removed the problem." Then he looked toward Asha. "And I intend to finish what I started." For several seconds, nobody moved. The underground chamber seemed to shrink around them. The lantern in Elira's hand flickered. A drop of wax fell onto the stone floor. Behind Lord Malrec, 6 soldiers stood with swords drawn. Behind Elira, Asha was breathing heavily. Kaelen held his sword in front of him. His eyes never left Malrec. "What did you do?" Malrec smiled. It was not the smile of a frightened man. It was the smile of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided. "I did what your family was too weak to do." Kaelen's grip tightened. "Answer me." Malrec stepped into the chamber. "I poisoned the beast." Elira's face went pale. Asha gave a low growl. Malrec stopped. For the first time, his confidence faltered. The wolf's golden eyes were fixed on him. "You see?" Malrec said softly. "Even now, she knows." Kaelen stepped forward. "You poisoned her for months." "Yes." "Why?" Malrec's smile returned. "Because your kingdom has forgotten who holds the real power." Kaelen's eyes narrowed. "You." Malrec laughed quietly. "The throne is a chair." He gestured toward the ancient walls. "That is power." He pointed at Asha. "That is power." Then he pointed toward Elira. "And that blood is the key to controlling it." Elira stepped backward. Malrec continued. "Your ancestors made a mistake when they allowed the guardians to choose the royal beasts. The wolves were never meant to serve kings. They were meant to judge them." Kaelen looked at the ancient carvings. "Why did my family hide this?" "Because your ancestors were afraid." The answer came too quickly. Malrec walked toward the stone table. They discovered that the guardian bloodline could influence the bond. They could calm the beast, strengthen it, even break it. Kaelen looked toward Asha. "That is why you wanted Elira gone." Malrec nodded. "Yes." "And why you poisoned Asha?" "Yes." Elira's voice was quiet. "But why kill her?" Malrec turned. "Because the king without his beast is only a man." Kaelen's face hardened. "And you intend to take the throne." "I intend to save the kingdom from a king who cannot control his own weakness." Elira shook her head. "You are lying." Malrec's eyes narrowed. "You should be more careful. You don't want the kingdom." Elira looked at him. "You want the bond." Silence. Malrec's expression changed. Elira understood. "You believe the guardian blood can be transferred." Malrec stared at her. "The old records say the bond can be forced." Kaelen's eyes widened. "You plan to use her?" Malrec nodded. "Her blood, combined with the blood of the royal beast, would create something stronger than either." Elira stepped backward. "You would kill her?" "If necessary." Asha growled. The sound rolled through the chamber. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Kaelen raised his sword. "You will not touch her." Malrec smiled. "You still think you are in control." He lifted one hand. The soldiers attacked. Kaelen moved first. His sword struck the first blade aside. The chamber exploded into motion. Metal struck stone. Elira pulled Asha behind the table. Kaelen fought 3 soldiers at once.
He was fast.
Precise. But the chamber was narrow. One soldier came from behind. Asha lunged. She slammed into him. The man crashed against the wall. Asha staggered. Elira caught her.
Easy.
The wolf's breath came fast. Kaelen saw blood spreading beneath her fur. The poison had weakened her. He shouted, "Elira!" She looked at him. The root. She understood. The ancient herb. The antidote. It had been described in the records. But the passage behind the chamber had collapsed. Elira looked toward the old map on the table. There was another route. A narrow passage beneath the mountain.
She grabbed the map.
Kaelen. He looked. "We need the sanctuary." Malrec heard her. He smiled. "You will never reach it." Kaelen charged him. Malrec stepped backward. A soldier blocked the king. Another. Then another. Malrec escaped through the doorway. Kaelen fought his way free. "Go." Elira hesitated. I'll follow." She took Asha and ran. The passage beneath the mountain was narrow. Water dripped from the ceiling. The walls were covered in ice. Elira held the lantern in one hand and supported Asha with the other. The wolf stumbled. "Come on." Asha kept moving. Every few steps, Elira stopped to catch her breath. The passage seemed endless. Behind them came the sounds of fighting. Then an explosion. The tunnel shook. Stone fell from the ceiling. Elira covered Asha. Dust filled the air. When it cleared, the passage behind them was blocked. They were alone. Asha lay down. Elira knelt beside her.
No.
The wolf's eyes closed. Not yet. Elira pressed her forehead against Asha's. "You waited for me." Asha breathed softly. "You waited all those months." A tear slipped down Elira's cheek. "I am not leaving you again." She stood. Then looked ahead. The tunnel continued. She lifted the lantern. "Come on." Asha slowly stood. Together they moved deeper. Eventually the passage opened. Elira stepped into a vast underground chamber.
She stopped.
The sanctuary was enormous. Stone pillars rose into darkness. Ancient statues of wolves stood along the walls. In the center was a pool of clear water, and beside it grew a silver-leafed plant. Elira recognized it immediately. The mountain root. She rushed toward it. Asha collapsed. Elira tore the root free. She returned to the wolf. She crushed the root between 2 stones and mixed it with water. Asha barely opened her eyes. Elira lifted the medicine. "Please." Asha swallowed. Nothing happened. Elira waited. 1 breath.
2.
3. Nothing. Then Asha's body shook. Elira held her. The wolf coughed. Dark liquid spilled from her mouth. Elira stared. The poison. It was leaving. Asha breathed deeply. Her eyes opened. The golden color was brighter. Elira laughed through tears. "You stayed." Asha slowly raised her head, then pressed her nose against Elira's hand. Elira closed her eyes. For a few precious seconds, there was peace. Then a sound echoed through the sanctuary. A wolf howl. But this one was different. It was not outside. It came from the mountains themselves. Asha stood. Her ears lifted. Elira turned toward the entrance. A faint blue light appeared between the ancient statues. One wolf stepped from the darkness. Then another. Then another. Ancient wolves. Their coats were white, silver, and gray. They surrounded Asha. None attacked. Instead, they lowered their heads. Elira understood. The guardian bond had awakened. Asha stepped toward them, then stopped beside Elira. She had chosen. Not the ancient wolves. Not the kingdom. Elira. The wolves turned toward the exit. They were calling her. Calling Asha. Calling the old bond back into the world. Elira looked at the passage. "We have to go." Asha followed. They emerged from the mountain just as dawn began breaking over the northern ridge. But Blackstone Fortress was burning. Smoke rose into the sky. The rebellion had begun. Elira stared. Her face went pale. Kaelen was somewhere inside. She looked at Asha. The wolf looked back. Then they ran. back toward the kingdom, back toward the throne, back toward the man who had once taken everything from them. But this time, Elira was not returning as a prisoner. She was returning as the guardian. And the ancient wolves were coming with her. By the time Elira reached the outer walls of Blackstone Fortress, the sun had disappeared behind a wall of black clouds, and the snow that had fallen so gently that morning had become a violent storm. Smoke twisted above the towers, carrying the bitter smell of burning wood across the valley. Bells rang from somewhere inside the fortress, but there was no order in their sound anymore. They rang because someone was pulling them in panic, warning the kingdom that the royal stronghold had fallen into chaos. Elira stopped at the edge of the forest with Asha beside her and stared through the trees. Only a few hours earlier, she had been running through the mountain tunnels believing the fortress might still be safe. Now flames moved behind the battlements, shadows rushed across the walls, and armed men fought beneath the gatehouse. Asha stood beside her, breathing more strongly than she had in months, her white fur shining beneath the storm.
She was still weak.
The poison had taken too much from her, but there was something different in her eyes now. The emptiness was gone. Elira reached down and touched the wolf's neck. Asha turned her head toward her, and for one quiet moment, neither needed words. They both understood what waited beyond the trees. Kaelen was still inside. Elira had spent months believing the king had chosen the throne over her, and perhaps he had, but she had also seen him risk everything to find her. She had seen the regret in his face when he placed the cloak beside her in the snow. She had seen him kneel beside her injured ankle without asking whether she forgave him. He had not become innocent simply because he regretted what he had done, but he had finally begun to understand what his choices had cost. Elira looked toward the fortress again. "We go back," she whispered. Asha lifted her head. Somewhere behind them, deep within the forest, a howl answered. Then another. Then dozens more. The ancient wolves emerged between the trees, silent shapes moving through the snow. Elira's breath caught. They did not run ahead. They did not circle her. They simply followed. She started toward the fortress, Asha walking beside her, and behind them came the wolves of the old forest, returning to a kingdom that had forgotten their name. Inside Blackstone Fortress, Kaelen was fighting for every corridor. The rebellion had begun shortly after he discovered the sanctuary passage. Malrec had moved faster than expected. Loyal soldiers had seized the western tower, locked the gates, and taken control of the armory. Several members of the council had declared that Kaelen was no longer fit to rule because he had allowed a guardian bloodline into the royal fortress. Others had simply disappeared, waiting to see which side would win. Kaelen had spent the last hour moving from chamber to chamber with a handful of loyal guards, trying to prevent the rebels from reaching the northern wing. He had not seen Elira. He had not seen Asha. He did not know whether they had escaped the collapsing passage. Every unanswered minute felt like another piece of his heart being torn away. Captain Darren found him near the old staircase. Blood marked the captain's cheek, and one sleeve had been cut open from shoulder to wrist. "The eastern gate is lost," Darren said. Kaelen looked toward the courtyard. "How many?" "Too many." "Malrec." "Heading for the northern tower." Kaelen's expression changed. "Asha's chamber." Darren nodded. "He knows where she is." Kaelen turned immediately. They ran. The corridor was filled with smoke. Servants pressed themselves against the walls as soldiers rushed past. Somewhere above them, glass shattered. A horn sounded. Kaelen reached the northern tower and found the door hanging open. The chamber was empty. The blankets were torn from the floor. A bowl lay broken beside the fireplace. For one terrible moment, Kaelen thought Asha was dead. Then he saw the blood on the stone. Too much blood. "No," he whispered. Darren looked around. "Majesty." Kaelen knelt. The blood was fresh, but it was not Asha's. It belonged to one of the guards. Someone had fought their way through. Kaelen stood. Then he heard a howl from outside. It was distant, powerful, familiar. His entire body froze. Asha. Another howl followed. Then another. Kaelen walked toward the window. Snow blew across the courtyard, and through the storm he saw movement beyond the outer wall. Dozens of wolves were approaching the fortress. White wolves. Gray wolves. Black wolves. Wolves from the northern forest. Wolves that had avoided humans for generations. Wolves that, according to every royal record, should never have come near Blackstone. At their center walked Asha. Beside her was Elira. Kaelen closed his eyes for a moment. She was alive. He had no time to feel relief. A soldier rushed into the chamber. Majesty, Malrec has taken the throne room. Kaelen opened his eyes. How many men? At least 50. Then we take it back. Darren looked toward the courtyard. The wolves? Kaelen stared at Elira below. They are not ours to command. The word surprised even him. Months ago, he would have ordered soldiers to drive them away. Now he understood. The wolves were not weapons. They were witnesses. And perhaps they had come to decide whether he was worthy of standing beside them. In the courtyard, Elira entered through the broken gate. Soldiers raised their weapons immediately.
She stopped.
Asha moved in front of her. The ancient wolves spread across the snow behind them. Their presence alone caused the soldiers to hesitate. No one wanted to be the first man to attack. Elira looked at the frightened faces around her and raised both hands. Lower your weapons. Nobody moved. She tried again, louder this time. No one needs to die. One soldier looked toward the others. They were young. Some were barely old enough to have scars. They had been told Elira was a traitor. They had been told Asha was a monster. Yet now they were looking at a woman standing beside a wolf that could tear a man apart and seeing neither creature attack. Elira stepped forward. Malrec is using you. A captain near the gate shouted that she was lying. Elira looked at him, then asked him why he poisoned the beast you were ordered to protect. Silence spread through the courtyard. She pointed toward the northern tower. Ask him why he knew about the poison before the king told anyone. Several soldiers looked at one another. Doubt moved through them like a crack through ice. Elira continued. He does not want to protect Vial. He wants you to fight for a throne he intends to steal. One soldier lowered his sword. Then another. A third dropped his weapon into the snow. The rebellion began to fracture, without a single arrow being fired. But Malrec was not finished. He stood in the throne room surrounded by his loyal soldiers. The great doors were barred. Torches burned along the walls. The royal crown sat on the throne behind him. He had not yet placed it on his head because he wanted Kaelen to see it first. When the king entered, Malrec smiled. You came alone. Kaelen looked around the room. You always did prefer rooms without witnesses. Malrec laughed. You still think this is about you. Kaelen drew his sword. It is about the people you poisoned. Malrec's expression hardened. The people forget quickly. Not this time. You are weak. Kaelen stepped forward. Perhaps. Malrec looked surprised. You admit it? Kaelen's sword remained lowered. I was weak when I allowed fear to make my decisions. I was weak when I believed a council's lies because I was afraid of losing control. I was weak when I let an innocent woman leave this fortress alone. He looked toward the throne. But I am not going to make that mistake again. Malrec raised his hand. Soldiers attacked. The fight erupted around the throne. Kaelen moved with the skill of a warrior who had spent his entire life preparing for war, but there were too many. Darren fought beside him. Steel struck steel. Torches fell. A table shattered. Kaelen took a blow across his shoulder and stumbled. Malrec watched from behind his guards.
Look at you, he said.
The great Alpha King bleeding on his own floor. Kaelen looked up. Better my blood than theirs.
He pushed himself upright.
Outside the chamber, a howl shook the fortress. The soldiers hesitated. Another howl followed. Then the doors began to tremble. Malrec turned toward them. What is that? Kaelen smiled for the first time that night. You know what it is. The doors burst open. Asha entered. She did not charge. She simply walked. Her white fur was stained with blood, but her head was high. Ancient wolves filled the corridor behind her, their eyes shining in the torchlight. The soldiers backed away. Malrec stared at the beast he had spent months poisoning. Impossible. Asha looked at him. Her lips pulled back from her teeth. Malrec took one step backward. Kaelen lowered his sword. Asha did not need him to fight for her. She had come to stand beside him. But before anyone could move, Malrec pulled a hidden blade and grabbed Darren from behind. He pressed the weapon against the captain's throat. "Stay back." Kaelen froze. Malrec dragged Darren toward the side door. "You think you have one?" he whispered. "The kingdom will remember this night." Elira appeared behind Asha. She saw the blade. She saw Darren's frightened face. Then she saw the rage in Kaelen's eyes. She knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to attack. He wanted to end Malrec. But one wrong movement would kill Darren. Elira stepped forward. "Malrec." He turned toward her. "You wanted my blood." His expression changed. "Then take me instead." Kaelen immediately shook his head.
No.
Elira did not look at him. "You have spent months trying to prove that I am dangerous. You have told everyone my blood belongs to the forest. You wanted to use me." She took another step. "Then let me give you what you wanted." Malrec smiled. He pushed Darren aside and reached for her. It was exactly what Elira wanted. The moment he released the captain, Asha moved. She crossed the distance in a blur of white fur. Malrec fell backward. His knife flew across the floor. Asha pinned him beneath one enormous paw. She did not bite. She did not kill him. She simply held him there. Kaelen walked forward and took the knife. "You will stand trial." Malrec laughed. "You think the council will condemn me?" Kaelen looked toward the doorway. Several council members stood there. They had heard everything. Behind them were servants, soldiers, healers, and villagers who had entered the fortress seeking safety. Kaelen held up the vial of poison. "They will now." The truth spread through Blackstone Fortress before midnight. The hidden records were brought from the sanctuary. The poison was examined. Malrec's servants confessed. The council learned that Elira's exile had been arranged by Malrec months before Kaelen had ever seen the ancient documents. He had manipulated the king's fear. He had planted doubts about Elira's family. He had used the royal seal to obtain the poison. He had ordered the guards to remove her from the fortress. Every piece of the plan had been designed around one belief, that Kaelen would choose control over trust. He had nearly been right. But the victory was not yet complete. Asha suddenly staggered. Elira turned. The wolf's legs buckled. "Asha!" She caught the beast's head before it struck the floor. The entire room went silent. Kaelen dropped beside them. "Asha." The wolf's eyes were open, but barely. The antidote had removed the poison, but the damage remained. Months of starvation. Months of sickness. Months of weakness. Elira pressed her hands against Asha's fur. "She needs rest." Kaelen looked at her. "Will she live?" Elira did not answer immediately. She lowered her forehead against Asha's, then whispered, "I don't know." The king looked at the wolf. For the first time in his life, Kaelen felt completely powerless. There was no army he could command.
No law he could change.
No enemy he could defeat. He could not order Asha to survive. He could not force Elira to forgive him. All he could do was wait. And as the storm raged outside Blackstone Fortress, Asha's breathing grew quieter. Elira remained beside her. Kaelen stayed on the other side of the room. He did not touch her. He did not ask her to forgive him. He simply watched. And somewhere beyond the fortress walls, the ancient wolves began howling into the darkness. Not in triumph.
Not yet.
It sounded almost like mourning. Because even though Malrec had fallen, even though the kingdom had survived, even though the truth had finally been revealed, the life of the great white wolf still hung by a thread. And before dawn, everyone in Blackstone Fortress would learn whether the woman who had been brought home in chains could save the creature that had waited for her all along. The storm did not stop that night. Snow struck the windows of Blackstone Fortress with such force that the glass trembled inside its iron frames, while the wind moved through the towers with a long, mournful sound that made the ancient stones seem almost alive. Fires burned in every corridor because the cold had become dangerous, yet inside Asha's chamber nobody seemed to notice the temperature anymore. All attention had narrowed to one enormous, white wolf lying on a bed of blankets beside the fireplace. Asha had not moved for nearly an hour. Elira sat beside her. Her hands rested gently against the wolf's neck, feeling every breath. Slow, uneven, then another. Kaelen stood several steps away. He had not left. His shoulder was bleeding through the torn fabric of his shirt, but he seemed unaware of it. The royal healers had offered to treat him twice. Both times he had refused. There were more important wounds in the room. Elira looked up. You should let them treat that. Kaelen glanced at his shoulder. It can wait.
No.
Her voice was quiet. But you can. He looked at her. For a moment, the old Kaelen might have ordered her to stop. Instead, he nodded. A healer entered. Kaelen sat near the wall while the wound was cleaned. The room returned to silence. Asha breathed. Elira listened. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The wolf's ears twitched. Elira immediately placed her hand against Asha's head. It's all right. Asha opened her eyes. Elira leaned closer. You're safe. The wolf slowly closed her eyes again. Kaelen watched. He had seen Asha face armies without fear. He had seen her stand between him and an attacking war beast. He had watched her cross frozen rivers and climb mountains. But he had never seen her look peaceful like this. Only with Elira. The realization hurt. Not because he was jealous. Because he finally understood what he had taken away from both of them. When Elira had first arrived at the fortress, she had given Asha something simple.
Safety.
Kaelen had spent his entire life believing safety came from walls, soldiers, laws, weapons, and power. Elira had proved him wrong. Sometimes safety was simply knowing that someone would stay. Kaelen looked at the woman beside the wolf. Why did you come back? Elira did not look at him. You brought me. I mean after you had a chance to leave. She was silent. Then she said, because she needed me. Kaelen lowered his eyes. Only her. Elira's fingers stopped moving. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she looked at him. I don't know yet. The answer was honest. It was not forgiveness. But it was not rejection either. Kaelen accepted it. For the rest of the night, neither spoke. Near dawn, the storm finally weakened. The first pale light appeared behind the mountains. The fortress was exhausted. Soldiers slept against walls. Servants moved quietly through corridors. The wounded were being treated. Malrec had been locked beneath the eastern tower under heavy guard. The council had gathered in the great hall. And in the northern chamber, Asha remained still. Elira had not slept. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. Her hair had fallen loose around her face. She rested her head against the side of the bed. Her hand remained on Asha. Kaelen stood at the window. The sky slowly turned silver. Then Elira heard something. Asha breathed differently. Elira lifted her head. Asha. The wolf's paw moved. Just slightly. Elira froze. Asha's eyes opened. Golden.
Clear. Alive.
Elira leaned closer. The wolf raised her head.
Slowly.
Painfully. But she raised it. A tear rolled down Elira's cheek. You came back. Asha looked at her, then pushed herself upright. Her legs trembled. Elira reached to support her. But Asha stood. The wolf stood. After months of weakness, after poison and hunger and pain, the great white wolf stood beneath the morning light. Kaelen turned. He stared. Asha took one step. Then another. She walked toward Elira. She lowered her enormous head against the woman's chest. Elira wrapped both arms around her. A broken laugh escaped her. For the first time in months, Asha's tail moved freely. Kaelen looked away. He wiped his eyes before anyone could see. Then, Asha turned. She looked at him. Kaelen stopped breathing. He had expected anger. He had expected rejection. Instead, the wolf simply watched him. Kaelen slowly walked forward. One step, then another. He stopped several feet away. Asha did not growl. Elira looked at him. Kaelen looked at the wolf. Then he did something he had never done before. He lowered himself to his knees. Not as king. Not as Alpha. Not as the ruler of air. Just as a man. A man who had made a terrible mistake. His head bowed. I am sorry. The words were simple. There was no command in them. No expectation. Asha watched him. Kaelen continued. I thought I was protecting you. His voice cracked. I was protecting my fear. Elira remained silent. Kaelen looked at her. And I hurt you. He lowered his gaze again. I cannot undo that. The room was silent. I cannot ask you to forget. He took a slow breath. But if you allow me, he looked toward Asha. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I have learned. Asha stepped forward. Kaelen did not move. The wolf came closer. She lowered her head. Her nose touched his forehead. Kaelen closed his eyes. Asha stayed there for several seconds. Then she stepped back. Elira watched. Something inside her finally broke open. Not because everything was forgiven. It wasn't. But because Kaelen had finally stopped asking for forgiveness and started accepting responsibility. That was the beginning, not the end. The council met later that morning. Kaelen entered the great hall without his crown. The nobles noticed. So did everyone else. He stood before them while the ancient guardian records were read aloud. The truth of Vair's history was finally spoken. The first Alpha Kings had not conquered the northern wolves. They had made a pact with them. The wolves had agreed to protect the kingdom only if the rulers promised never to enslave the guardians who maintained the bond. For centuries, that promise had been honored. Then one generation broke it. The royal family had begun hiding the guardian bloodline. They had imprisoned wolves.
They had forced bonds.
They had turned a sacred relationship into a weapon. And the kingdom had spent generations paying for that mistake. Kaelen listened to every word. Then he stood. The law ends today. One of the older nobles protested. Majesty, such a decision? Kaelen raised his hand.
No.
The hall became silent. No more chains for guardians. He looked toward Elira. No more forced bonds. Then toward the windows overlooking the forest. No more hunting of wolves on sacred land. The council looked uncertain. Kaelen continued. And no ruler of Vair will ever again separate a bonded guardian from their beast for political convenience. The old law was struck from the royal record that same day. The announcement traveled through the kingdom. In villages buried beneath snow, people gathered around fireplaces to hear the news. In hunting camps, men lowered their weapons. In mountain settlements, old women who remembered the forgotten stories began crying. The guardians had returned. And the king had finally acknowledged them. But Elira did not celebrate. She remained beside Asha. The wolf was healing.
Slowly.
She ate small meals. She walked a little farther each day. She slept more peacefully. Yet there were still moments when her legs weakened. Moments when Elira had to catch her. Moments when fear returned. Healing was not a miracle that erased pain. It was a long road. Kaelen understood that. He never pressured Elira to return to the royal court. Instead, he rebuilt the small garden beside Asha's chamber. He repaired the wooden shelter where Elira had once kept herbs. He ordered the servants to leave it exactly as she wanted. He did not give her jewels. He did not offer her titles. He simply gave her choices. One afternoon, Elira found him repairing a broken fence. She stopped. You are doing that yourself? Kaelen looked up. Apparently kings can hold hammers. She almost smiled.
Badly.
He looked at the crooked fence. I noticed. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Elira walked over. She took the hammer. Kaelen let her. Together, they fixed the fence. It was not romantic. It was not grand. There were no musicians. No royal ceremony. Just two people standing in a garden beneath falling snow, repairing something that had been broken. And somehow that mattered more. Months passed. Spring finally reached Vair. The snow melted from the rooftops. The rivers began moving again. Flowers appeared around Blackstone Fortress. Asha grew stronger. Her white coat became bright again. She began walking through the royal gardens. Children who had once been terrified of her watched from a distance. At first, they stayed behind their parents. Then one brave little boy approached. Asha stopped. She looked at him. The boy froze. Elira smiled. Let her decide. Asha lowered her head. The child reached out. His small hand touched her fur. Asha remained still. The boy smiled. Soon there were more. The wolf who had once been called a monster became a symbol of peace. The kingdom changed with her. The ancient wolves returned to the northern forest. They did not attack villages. They did not threaten travelers. They simply lived among the mountains, as they always had. And once each year, during the first snowfall, the people of Vial left food at the forest edge. Not as an offering to monsters. As a sign of respect, the old pact had been restored. One evening, Elira stood beneath the royal garden archway. Snow drifted gently from the sky. Asha walked beside her. Kaelen followed several steps behind. Elira stopped. She turned. Kaelen stopped too. For months, he had walked behind them. He had learned not to lead every path. Elira looked at him. You know you don't have to stay behind us. Kaelen smiled faintly. I know. Then why do you? He looked toward Asha. Then toward Elira. Because you choose the direction. Elira studied him. Asha moved closer and rested her head against Elira's shoulder. Elira smiled. Then she turned toward the forest. They began walking. Asha beside her. Kaelen behind. Not because he was beneath them. Not because he was weak. But because he finally understood something he had never learned from the throne. Love could not be commanded. Trust could not be demanded. And loyalty could not be chained into existence. It had to be earned. Years later, children in Vial would hear the story of the great white wolf who stopped eating when her guardian was taken away. They would hear about the king who crossed the frozen mountains to bring that woman home. They would hear about the chains, the poison, the hidden sanctuary, the ancient wolves, and the night the forgotten pact returned. But the old storytellers always ended the tale the same way. They would describe a winter morning when the snow covered Blackstone Fortress in white. They would describe a woman walking through the gardens, a great white wolf walking beside her, and a king following several steps behind. No chains, no guards, no throne between them, only footsteps in the snow. Because the kingdom had finally learned what the old guardians had known all along. A beast does not become loyal because it fears its master. A wolf does not remain because it is forced to stay. And love does not survive because someone possesses it. It survives because, even after betrayal, someone chooses kindness. Elira reached the forest edge. Asha stopped. Far beyond the trees came the distant howl of the ancient wolves. Asha lifted her head, then answered. One howl, then another. Soon the mountains were filled with their voices. Kaelen stood quietly behind Elira. She turned toward him. For the first time since the day she had returned in chains, there was no sadness in her eyes. Only peace. She reached out her hand. Kaelen took it, and together they walked into the falling snow. Not as king and prisoner, not as master and guardian, but as two people who had finally learned how precious freedom was, because they had once lost it. And beside them walked the white wolf who had nearly died waiting for them to understand. The wolf who had been called a monster. The wolf who had been poisoned. The wolf who had refused to live without the woman she trusted. Asha looked back once, then continued toward the forest. Her footprints disappeared beneath the fresh snow. But the bond she had protected would remain. Long after the storm. Long after the throne. Long after the people who had nearly destroyed it were forgotten. And somewhere beyond the mountains, where the ancient wolves still moved beneath the moonlight, the old guardians watched over Vial once more. The kingdom was safe. The chains were gone. The truth had been restored. And the great white wolf was finally home.